the item?
Well, when we get to the item, yeah. And then you can take them out one by one, see at least you know who's left to talk. So, yeah.
Right, I think we're good to go, Jesse. You need to unmute in the bottom left of your mouse.
Good evening, fellow councillors and members of the public, to our ultimate meeting of the full council. May I first ask Reverend Walsh to lead us in the right direction, Reverend, this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our lives are full of endings, and yet so often we fail to end things well. Either we want to move on to the next thing and not dwell on the past, or we want to cling to the past and are reluctant to let go. We need to learn how to have good endings as individuals and as we gather together in our organisations to honour the past whilst moving into the future. Those of us who are ministers of religion have sadly seen rather too many endings in the past year. But although the end of a life is always sad, good endings are possible. And the same is true of organisations. How do we do this properly? Let us pray. Eternal God, in whom we have our origins and our ending, you hold our lives in your hands. Teach us to start well, to end well, and to live well, for the good of all and the glory of your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Walsh. Item 1, apologies. Are there any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, I have one in front of me, and unfortunately it's Mr. Graham Salisbury will not be with us this evening. Any others? Have we got a full?
We've received no other apologies.
Lovely, thank you. Minutes of the council meeting on the 16th of December to be signed. Has anybody got any problems with them? Are you all happy for me to sign them?
Yeah, I think a lot of problems up there.
Any declarations of interest, item 3, anybody?
Councillor Groom.
Councillor Groom.
You need to unmute, Councillor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm an employee of the County Council Library Service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I shall move on to item 4, Mayor's announcements. My first duty this evening is rather solemn, as normal. And first I wish to remember Dr. Ahmed Mukhtar, who passed away in the early January following a short illness. Dr. Mukhtar was an immensely popular and well-respected local figure who had been a long-standing clinical paediatrician at Kettering General Hospital and had also served as High Sheriff of Northamptonshire, a Deputy Lord Lieutenant, Governor of the University of Northampton, and President of the Northampton branch of St John Ambulance. He was also an Associate Examiner of the General Medical Council and as a member of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Tribunal. He will be sadly missed by all those who knew him. I would like to say something on a personal thing with Ahmed. He was a personal friend of mine who I met because he had a passion for collecting antiques. And I have to say that his smile will always stay with me. And if there were more people like him in this world, it'd be a much better place. I also want to remember Christine Pote, who passed away on the 31st of December 2020. She was a former borough mayoress of the municipal year of 2003-2004, alongside her husband, the Mayor, Councillor Alan Pote. And again, on a personal note, Christine and Alan are personally responsible for me meeting my wife, Lorraine, the Mayoress. I also wish to remember Shushila Wright, who was a Mayoress of the Borough of Kettering for the municipal year 1997 to 98, alongside her husband, the Mayor, Councillor Ray Wright, who is no longer with us. Mrs. Wright passed away on the 29th of January this year. And finally, we have Patricia Bayes, Mrs. Bayes to me. She's another former Mayoress who sadly passed away on the 7th of February. Mrs. Bayes was Mayoress alongside her husband, the Mayor, Councillor Maurice Bayes, for the municipal year of 2006-2007. And on that note, fellow councillors, will you join with me in a minute's silence for who I've just spoken of and for all those that have passed away of COVID and other items in the borough. Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. Now then, I suspect you've all been wondering what the Mayor's been doing with his time, how he's able to do civic duties, etc. So I've been doing quite a bit virtually. And this evening, I wanted to show you a video that I sent to a local gentleman in a care home who had reached the age of 100. His name is Jim Wills, and if you could just bear with us, I hope you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about.
Can you all see that, members? Then I shall begin.
Good afternoon. I hope I'm talking to Jim Wills, and this is your Mayor of Kettering, Councillor James Burton, sending you a birthday wish. Jim, I understand you're 100 today. What a remarkable accolade you have to reach 100. I hope you are well, and I'm sure you're being very well treated on this very special day. So, for the first time, I do believe, in mayoral history, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Jim, happy birthday to you. I would also like to thank all your people who look after you, because they are very important, as you know, Jim, and I'm sure you're well looked after in that wonderful home of yours. I've sent a little gift because I understand you have a sweet tooth. Please don't get toothache eating the Mayor's sweets. Live long and prosper, Jim. Happy birthday. That'll go viral, I'm sure. I also recently recorded a video at the request of St Mary's Church School of Primary School in Kettering to discuss what it's like to be the Mayor of the Borough of Kettering. Should members wish to see this, it can be circulated to you. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Councillors Bundy and Councillors Talbot for sending in your currency for the mayoral charity. I have to say it's greatly received, and we are actually totting up quite well. Councillor Bundy, yours was well over £50 worth of currency, and I do appreciate it very, very much. Thank you very much. And so if anybody else wishes to sort through their drawers, we will receive anything that, or I will receive anything that I could use. Thank you very much. Right, item 5, a leader. Have you anything to say?
Mr. Mayor, no, I did have some news, but it's not quite ready, so we'll have to wait until the next meeting. I apologise, but I would just like to note that I heard the other day that Mick Scrimshaw is not going to stand, and I think that's quite sad, really. I was looking forward to working with him in the future. It would be nice just to note that as well.
Thank you for that piece of information, Leader, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say at the last council meeting. Report of the Managing Director. I believe there's none. Now, item 6, which is the right to speak. I understand we have 8 speakers that wish to speak this evening on item 7, the Climate Change Action Plan, and I will bring them into the discussion one by one as they came and registered. So if we go on to item 7, which is the Climate Change Action Plan, Councillor Ian Jelly, please.
Bear with me, Mr. Mayor, while I just invite in all of our speakers. There's one there who hasn't used their real name, but I suspect I know who it is, so I'll let them in anyway. And just double check before we begin.
We're just waiting for the speakers to arrive at the waiting room. I've been at the dentist.
No, the iPad, the Galaxy tablet was actually Councillor Bain, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, right. So Councillor Bain is joining us, is he?
Hello, speakers. I hope you can hear me. We've reached the point in the agenda where Climate Change Action Plan is going to be introduced. We'll then take you one by one in the order that you registered to speak. You'll get your 3 minutes each, and then after the 3 minutes, I'll pop you back in the waiting room, if that's all right, and the meeting will continue on YouTube. So, Councillor Jelly, I believe.
Councillor Jelly, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everybody. Mr. Mayor, this report this evening is an update on this council's Climate Change Action Plan and an update on the current national and international response to climate change. As we know, going forward, all of this work will now be encompassed in the new Unitary Council from the 1st of April, along with the work being done in other areas of North Northamptonshire, such as Corby, Wellingborough and East Northants. Item 3 of this report covers the wider international and national progress, and it covers take-up of carbon, low carbon emissions, low carbon energy supplies, and land and greenhouse gas removal. Item 4 in the report covers the update of this council's action plan from 2019 and shows a comprehensive list of the ongoing actions to date. I thank officers for putting together such a comprehensive final report for us this evening. I know that a lot has happened over the last year, and much of what we expected to do has been impacted by the pandemic, but we still have been working on reducing the impact of our environment. We have changed our recycling collections and gone commingled, using less freighters to do the same job across the borough, no separate paper collections. So the freighters are now being used for any recycled collections with far better efficiencies than we had before. It was interesting to note that in the early part of the pandemic, recycling levels increased by over 30%, with more people being at home. This has now actually started to drop back to the more in the line with the original levels. We're working with putting electric charging points in and planting more and more trees. The Pardon the Weeds campaign, which we did earlier, last year actually, won national acclaim with the International Green Apple Award, which is awarded to environmental best practice, something we should all be very proud of. As I said, all of this work will carry on forward into Unitary. We have a task and finish group set up in Unitary to take this forward, and we have yet to have a report back from them on their thoughts and proposals for the new council. We need strategy and plans into the core spatial strategy and our plans for the future, and make sure any investments we make maximise the benefits of what we are doing for everybody in the area. We're already talking with senior officers on the new authority, with discussions of the new council becoming paperless. Paper and printing are a significant cost to any authority or business, and we know the impact of using reams and reams of paper, countless trees being cut down, and other areas where we can minimise air impact on the environment. But we have much, much more to do, and we must keep this momentum going into the new council and beyond. Mr. Mayor, I think that COVID has highlighted the impact we have on our planet. With virtually no flights and greatly reduced use of cars and trucks, the Earth's atmosphere was noticeably different in a very short space of time. We must learn from this and keep reducing our impact on this Earth. The recommendation in this report is to note the report, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy to recommend this report to Council for noting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jelly. Councillor Deering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd quite happy to second this proposal and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, we'll go to the speakers and we'll see. It's Andrew.
Andrew Wyatt, Mr. Mayor. So, Andrew, you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. You just need to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'd like to start by thanking the Council for the positive steps they have taken to reduce Kettering's effect on the global climate emergency. This report highlights at least some positive progress in most areas in the action plan, which is good to see. The COVID pandemic has obviously had an impact on the Council's ability to implement everything in the plan, and there are some areas where there has been little progress. Given that this is the case, I wonder if the Council has considered investing more time and resources into the areas where progress has been made, so that we could perhaps overachieve in some areas to counter the lack of progress in others. The scale of the global climate emergency requires us to take immediate and radical measures to reduce our impact, and I do worry that perhaps the Council's plan was a little under-ambitious in its scale and implementation. The fact that the Council only aspired to not spray glyphosate everywhere when it knew its use would be banned is very troubling. Reducing our use by 50% is simply not good enough, and I encourage the Council to ban its use completely, as many other councils have. Our impact on climate change must underpin every decision that the Council makes, and it doesn't always appear that this is the case. The recent changes to the plans with the library and the saving of mature trees that were due to be removed show that it is possible to do more. I hope that in the future new Northamptonshire Unitary will implement good planning decisions from the start, rather than being forced into change by public pressure. I hope that any councillors present who are elected to serve in the Northamptonshire Unitary will put climate change at the front and centre of every decision. We have an opportunity to take this seriously and implement new green ways of working from the beginning, and we have to take these opportunities now whilst we still have time to make a difference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Byatt.
Thank you, Mr. Byatt. I'll pop you back in the waiting room because space on the screen is at a premium. So, Mr. Balmer, Adam Balmer next, Chair. Mr. Balmer, when you're ready.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Mayor, councillors and officers. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with regard to the Climate Change Action Plan. I respect that important steps have been taken toward the transition to renewable energies and the tree planting, where the pandemic has not hindered these efforts. But the resultant action plan does omit some key information that would allow us to assess progress these steps have made on the issue of climate change. So firstly, the total measures outlined in the plan, even if followed through fully, would not be sufficient to prevent acceleration toward even higher carbon emissions, never mind to reduce carbon emissions toward any net zero targets. I'll focus almost exclusively on the example of the Segro development at Kettering Park Gateway. So this development was praised in the action plan as having a BREEAM rating of very good. Now, this rating says nothing about carbon emissions. According to the BREEAM's technical specifications, efforts to reduce carbon emissions would contribute to a higher rating of either excellent or outstanding. Since there's no mention of Segro's development meeting these higher standards, it plausibly does not take measures to reduce or eliminate emissions. Further evidence for this can be found on Segro's website, which states that they plan to offset emissions in future, but I quote, "We do not offset emissions currently." This can hardly be considered being developed to the highest ecological specifications as claimed in the action report. Given that the purpose of many of the measures is to reduce emissions, it seems remiss to leave out of the report any mention of the plausible outcome that overall emissions are to be increased by the 1.2 million square foot industrial and warehousing development proposed. The same standard, BREEAM very good, was also given for the proposed development at Weekley Hall Wood. And this development has the additional problem of 30,000 square foot of ancient woodland to be destroyed. Given that the removal of trees at this site or at other developments is not mentioned at the report, it's not clear whether we can expect a net gain or a net loss of trees, even if the climate action plan is implemented in full. So I think just basically the missing information makes it difficult to assess, how successful we can consider the climate action plan, even if it is fully implemented. That's all I wanted to say. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Balmer.
Thank you, Mr. Balmer. Right, Mr. Mayor, we now have John Padwick.
Mr. Padwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and officers for this opportunity to speak. It's clear from the number of speakers tonight that the issue is just as important as it was in July 2019, when this council declared the climate emergency. COVID has sharpened our minds even further. I hope it will continue to be seen as important in the new unitary authority. And here I have to give credit to the working party that has been set up by the Shadow Authority, and particularly the work of Kettering Councillor Anne Lee, who has gone at it like a dog with a rat. I think it would be fair to say that Kettering is leading the way in North Northants on this issue. It's clearly a cross-party commitment to our community that I hope will continue after May. The climate emergency is an issue for all of us. I thank the officers for the report tonight, which reflects considerable moves forward on a number of issues, but it does omit significant areas. Public transport, for one. I can't see any mention of this, as well as getting people out of their petrol-fueled cars, and I acknowledge the mention of electric charging points, although I'd like to see more of them, and also an answer to the difficulties of recharging in the tightly packed area of our town around Havelock Street and Regent Street. Surely we should have a clear strategy on how we can get people into our town centre without using cars at all. And although the cycle hub at the station is a move forward, what about a multimodal hub with buses going directly to the railway station? That's not rocket science. Maybe a unitary authority has the potential for more joined up thinking on something like this. Trees and hedges. Lots threatened or lost at the moment. East of Kettering, Hanwood Park, for example. Is there an audit of how many of them are lost? We know how important green space and woodland is to our community, as the 12,000 plus signatures on the Save Weekley Hall Wood petition tell us. But then I noticed on the plus side that over 500 trees have been planted this year. I sometimes wonder why the council's good work doesn't get more publicity. Bees. Loved that Pardon the Weeds initiative. But how does that tally with the loss of the ivy on the front wall of the library as part of the museum and art gallery redevelopment, which was a great attraction for bees, as Councillor Adams pointed out, and where it seems proper and full consideration and consultation might also have resulted in the loss of fewer trees and less of an outcry on social media. Kettering Borough Council should be proud that we were the first council in North Northamptonshire, I believe, to declare a climate emergency. Our new councils must be more than safe and legal. That's really not good enough. They should be leading the way. I hope our new councillors in our new structures will do just that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Padwick.
Thank you, Mr. Padwick. Mr. Mayor, up next we have Kyle Patel.
Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and officers for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Kyle Patel. I'm a secondary school English teacher from Pipers Hill Ward. Climate change is a crisis in which the fate of humanity is in question. That's not said for mere dramatic effect. It's a sane, valid statement supported by a mammoth of scientific data. News from Texas of blistering snowstorms, wildfires in America, Australia. Climate change is happening before us. We are a great deal away from those places, I accept, but the responsibility can be traced here, and in fact, it can be traced everywhere. Through continued inactivity to decisively approach climate change and an inability to address misinformation, it will keep these disasters motivated. However, motions like this in meetings like this can mean everything. Change scarcely starts by big bodies and large governmental happenings. It starts here, local government and local people coming together for the greater good. One must praise the work the council has done on addressing climate change, and especially by gathering important data. Local context is everything in cultivating solutions. Now, in relation to the 2020 air quality status report, one can find the measurements that's taken to improve air quality. And I hope these measures are supported and followed through by the new unitary authority and town council. The air quality status report stated the levels of nitrogen dioxide on some of our borough's most busiest roads and junctions. It's measured in micrograms in each cubic meter. Now, in this report, I noticed that the crossroads of Windmill Avenue and Barton Road in 2019 reached 41.4 in July, 40.2 in October, and 44.4 in November. However, the annual mean was measured just below 40, so it was accepted. Any annual measurement over 40 requires the council to produce an air quality action plan. This is my local area, and I am extremely concerned by these staggeringly high levels. There are many schools in this area, and increased levels of nitrogen dioxide can and will lead to health implications. So in a time when public health has never been a higher priority, shouldn't we be doing all we can to eliminate additional threats to our health? Now, I want to ask the council what is being done to combat air quality in this area. And I believe the new unitary authority has the motto of safe and legal. These numbers may be legal, but can the council sincerely say that it's safe? And one must also question the scheme of measurement. Are tubes the most effective method? And I just want to say that we have only one Earth. So please, let's work together and save it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Up next, Mr. Mayor, we have Des Dell.
Mr. Dell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and officers. I was pleased to read in this report about the Barton Road and Deeble Road cycle lanes that are planned, and will be seeking more information on these. As from speaking to the owners of the cycle shops in town, they've sold a huge number of bikes over the last year, so the people of our town are ready and waiting for more active travel infrastructure. Can I ask of James Wilson, is there a date set for the start of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan consultation? Now this year, I've been amazed by the surge in people using the current lockdown to get out litter picking. Through linking with the Northants Litter Wombles, which is a county-wide group of over 1,000 litter pickers, it has become apparent that Kettering Borough Council are one of the few councils across the county that provide litter picking equipment for free across Kettering and Corby. I want to thank the street cleansing and environmental care team for providing this service and being so great at delivering equipment and bags. The Kettering and Corby Wombles groups have been inundated with photos of parents and children standing proud next to their bags of rubbish. Although I do suspect a lot of the parents have then had to explain exactly what a womble is. My last point is regarding trees. As I'm sure you're aware, there's been uproar about the plans to fell trees as part of the gallery, library and museum project. This is a real shame, as the GLAM project should have been a celebration for Kettering Borough Council. The extension looks great and is much needed. However, I'm surprised the project didn't take into account the predictable public outrage about the felling of trees. We now have over 12,000 signatures on the petition to save Weekly Hall Wood, which is roughly 10% of the population of Kettering. That is a lot of people that care about what happens to the trees at Weekly Hall Wood, and I'd wager to trees in general. Now, back in January, I rode past members of your grounds team planting trees on Linden Avenue. I stopped to say thank you, and they advised me they were in the middle of planting 177 trees in the borough, with many more to follow. If I hadn't spotted them while I was on my bike, I'd have had no idea how many trees were being planted. So why aren't KBC shouting about this from the rooftops? It's fantastic PR and should be all over your social media. From conversations with Save Our Street Trees Northampton and the Urban Trees team at the Woodland Trust, it's apparent that we are unusual to have so many street trees being planted. Over in Far Cotton, it has taken 2 years to just get 21 trees planted, so what we have in Kettering is to be applauded. The grounds team are doing great and have done for many years. Now, I'm glad that most of the trees that were to be felled as part of the GLAM project have been saved, and I really hope the council can work with the Save Kettering's Heritage Quarter Trees group to come to an agreement about the remaining trees. The thing that I found heartening is the number of people who have become empowered and found their voices on behalf of trees, wildlife and nature. It is obvious that nature has a voice in Kettering in the form of a large number of very passionate people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dell.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. And we don't have the next speaker in the room, Mr. Mayor, so
Right.
we'll go to Stephen Esler.
Mr. Esler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and officers, for the opportunity to address you once again. I won't be taking up the allocation of 3 minutes, as I really only need to pose a couple of questions regarding the climate change report. First, I will say that given the detail and scope of the report, it is clear to me that the topic of climate change is one being taken very seriously by this council, and I hope that the incoming council gives it equal consideration. Those responsible for writing the report have done a great job, and I'm grateful for their efforts. I would like to obtain clarification from the council on page 13 of the report, where policy 21 of the North Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy is mentioned. This policy mentions the Forest for Life project supported by the JCS, which is one of only 5 carbon sink forestry projects. I have spoken with the newly appointed senior project officer for this project, and it has been confirmed that this project no longer exists in the same format as was intended by policy. Would it be possible for clarification on this? Is the project now reawakened by this recent appointment? Also, within the JCS, I direct the council's attention to policy 36, which seems to be in conflict of policy 21, as the area earmarked for warehouse development, Wigley Hall Wood, is also assigned to preservation as part of the carbon sink project. I am sure you will agree that it cannot be both, and I would appreciate it if this could be clarified also. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Esler.
Thank you, Mr. Esler. And last but not least, we have Emily Figarovitz.
Is that Emily here?
She is.
Yep. Hi. Lovely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Lovely. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and officers. I was really excited to read this climate change report for this update. In particular, it's really fantastic to see the cycle storage that's anticipated to be rolled out early this year, and that discussions are now being had about food waste and a number of other things. I have a few quick comments on various points. So firstly, 3.5 regarding reducing demand on for carbon activities. There's no mention of improved recycling, which would reduce waste transported to landfill. Similarly, this feeds into point 4.6 and our struggles with recycling bins in town centres. Obviously, contamination is always an issue, but hopefully there's some other solutions, such as sorting centres or recycling centres that could be set up locally, be it as a joint community council venture or a pure commercial business. This could cut cost in waste sent to landfill and allow the council to take on the responsibility of the contamination problem, at least until education changes our culture. 4.3, tree planting and weeds. I've seen the increased tree planting and action just this week, so thanks very much. I'm slightly concerned, however, by the way that the report talks about glyphosate and potentially reducing its use further despite the health risks of the chemical. There are non-toxic alternatives available, from using high pressure steam, a vinegar solution, or even just simply cutting fewer weeds. After the success of parting the weeds, we're feeding the bees signage. Also regarding biodiversity and the natural environment, it's not really mentioned how legislation, formal or informal, could be utilised to aid this. Alongside increased tree planting, applications for new buildings and removals of greenery should be much more carefully considered and approached with high caution now. We could even have a loose ban on healthy tree and foliage removals for the next 5 to 10 years until we've made a significant impact on the carbon reduction efforts. If communicated widely, this could send out a very clear message about our priorities for the next few years and offer powerful social influence. On point 4.4, it's great that KBC is allocating funds for a project manager to take charge of the LCWIP project, but the report suggests that the manager will be making a plan over the 12-month period, but the full project will be rolled out in 10 years. I was told last year that we would have to wait a year to see any cycle lane improvements, and from the sounds of this, it'll be at least another year before we see anything actioned. I'd like to know if that's correct. I've made a point at previous meetings that if the council makes some changes sooner, even if they're interim changes, that they'll be able to capitalise on people's changed habits during lockdown. But yes, putting a focus on cycle lanes now will help Kettering transition into an active travel town and help people form better habits before cars become the default again. And then finally, on 4.10, the report didn't mention incentivising businesses that much, apart from sponsoring an award. The report also notes that individuals and businesses can make a huge difference in reducing the town's carbon footprint. So investing here, you'd make a considerable saving. We need firmer legislation for businesses and incentives for those doing the right thing to really force change at the pace in which we need it. If all businesses could be forced to display their carbon footprint like they would a hygiene rating for a restaurant, it would force people to understand how much they're producing. Once that's in place, you can work into a tax system based on quantity and carbon offsetting. It would force the community and the council to create better resources for understanding carbon footprints and make businesses more accountable. Thanks for the chance to speak.
Here, Emily, you're trying to use up somebody else's minutes, aren't you? I know what you're up to. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
I'll put you back in the way.
Have we got the other speaker?
No, that's everyone.
That's everyone. Before I open it up to debate, I just want to tell fellow councillors, I actually met a Womble today. Her name was Amber and she got her daughter with her and they were along Rockingham Road doing their litter pick. And I have to say, I was greatly impressed by that. If that actually goes ahead across the borough, it'll save the borough a lot of money because we won't have to send our litter pickers out. Right, I open up to debate. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
We have
Councillors. Well, Councillor Lee, you're in first this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, colleagues. Many good things have happened, as highlighted in this report. And also the housing department, the environmental department have done a lot of good work. But I contend that there has been a lack of overall leadership and coordination in carrying out these good intentions, which means that progress was made in parts, but we are still behind, especially in 3 respects, which have shown a lack of urgency in what we are doing and what we have done, namely the cycling and walking plan, tree planting and air quality. Let me explain. This local cycling and walking plan has been so long in the making, as just highlighted by the previous speaker. We see on page 19, it is hoped the plan can be developed ideally over a 10-year period. Ideally, no. Ideally, that plan would be developed within the next 2 or 3 years. The sooner the better. 10 years would take us into 2031, and we hope to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2030. We have been promising action on better cycle lanes and secure cycle storage for a very long time. I don't know why we have to wait for it so long. Tree planting, time and again, I have indicated there's a huge army of volunteers out there keen to plant trees, to adopt trees and to keep them alive. But we need guidance on which trees and where they can be planted. And so, as speakers have said, we need a net tree count because residents are getting alarmed at the number of trees and hedgerows being cut in the borough. A typical tree can absorb around 21 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year, but only when the tree is fully grown. Saplings will absorb significantly less. So whenever trees are cut, and it happens, we need to consider how many need to be planted to make up for a hole in the carbon absorption. The Woodland Trust recommends that we adopt an emergency tree planting plan with a combination of street trees, which is happening, and less expensive woodland trees. Air quality, lastly, my last point. The only figure that is currently looked at is the annual mean. And was it Kyle Patel already pointed this out? The annualized figure, an annual weighted average for the entire year. So it needs to be below 40, otherwise the council is obliged to produce an air quality action plan. Now it alarms me that we are not looking at areas where, such as precisely Windmill Avenue, where there are a lot of schools and young people going past every day. We have no plan in the making, as far as I know, for when that figure is exceeded, which happens indeed several times a year. So those were my points, and I'm glad we had so many speakers. So thank you for letting me speak in the debate, Mr. Mayor.
You're very welcome, Councillor Lee. Thank you. Anybody else?
Councillor Hakewell.
Councillor Hakewell. Councillor Lee beat you to the fore this time.
Gutted. She speaks so well, and I'll make a mention of that. First of all, I really am pleased that the Northamptonshire Shadow have got a climate task and finish, and I've been working on that. And you'll see, Mr. Mayor, from the background, I can't find, and it may be just me, where is the pollinator strategy in this update? I'd just like to make the point that others have made, is that words are cheap, actions are what matter. And if I take you back, Mr. Mayor, and those members of the executive, most of all of whom are here, on the 12th of April 2017, we approved the pollinator strategy. An online, and these are the recommendations, online toolkit to be introduced. Can the portfolio holder tell me where I find the online toolkit? This is 4 years ago. Strategy be renewed annually through the Monitoring and Audit Committee, not done. Strategy embedded wherever possible in the planning system, not done. Information cards be produced with packets of seeds attached, themed on Kettering Borough Council's pollinator strategy, not done. And costs associated with the above should be contained within existing budgets, not done. So none of those things have actually been done, and I will look forward to finding out where the pollinator strategy is. Mr. Mayor, a long time ago, I made the point about eco bricks. And there is an eco brick. It's a plastic bottle full of plastic, single-use plastic. Every one of us can do that. I wonder how many people are. Another good one is there is a milk bottle. I don't have plastic milk bottles anymore. These are things that individuals can do, and where we should provide leadership on different things we can do individually. We can do that tomorrow morning if we wish to. Just going back, I was really proud to be moving the pollinator strategy with Councillor Lee. And it goes to show that whilst there are only 2 or 3 of us who are independents on the council, we can move things and get things forward. And I was very glad that it was unanimous when I moved that in 2019, and Councillor Lee very kindly seconded it at that time. I also would like to make the point that Rural Forum, which was cut off in its prime recently, argued the case for solar panels on the roofs of warehouses. I'm sure Councillor Roberts now knows what a solar PV is, but we still don't see those solar PV panels on the roofs of buildings. So what I'd like to say is that whilst we pat ourselves on the back, and this is a good update, and a lot of officer time has gone into it, it's not what we have done, it's what we intend to do and what we will do. And my last point there, Mr. Mayor, is I'd like to praise the Keeping Rothwell Clean and Green group. They're a group of people in Rothwell who, like the Wombles from Desdale and others have spoken, go out and collect the litter from alongside our roads. And I very much hope that the unitary will have a much greater focus on keeping our area clean and tidy. So where is the pollinator strategy? Could someone show me it in this policy document? Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Dutton, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dutton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to James and the team for a comprehensive report. Just a few things. At the bottom of page 23, it's a really impressive list of trees planted in Hamwood Park, over 5,000. But like John Padwick, I was disappointed to note and to see that a significant number of mature trees have been felled in the early stages of the development. One small woodland plantation, now gone forever, was a place where bats hunted during the early evening. At certain times of year, bats roost in hollow trees. The ornamental trees in the linear park will look splendid in time. The new native woodland will flourish, but it takes tens of years for a tree to mature and much more than that to establish a thriving ecosystem. Perhaps we need a biodiversity emergency to back up our climate strategy. We must encourage developers to protect, enhance, and link up valuable existing ecosystems when they consider where to plant new trees and hedgerows. In the middle of page 26, community litter picks have of course been halted by COVID-19. So it's great to see a street warden doing a solo litter pick on the Eyes Lodge and a family collecting litter while on their daily walk. So along with the mayor, I want to commend those people and hope that something can be done to reward those who have gone the extra mile by caring for the environment during the pandemic. At the end of the report, page 29, it's important to note the legal constraints under which climate councils work. We have to remember that, otherwise we lay ourselves vulnerable to judicial review. We can't use powers that we haven't got. But the Local Government Association notes that the new Environment Bill could point to a new relationship between local and national government when it finally becomes law. Councils might have greater responsibility for environmental improvement, and it's up to our political representatives in Parliament to make sure we have adequate financial resources to carry out this role. It may interest members to know that the Climate Task and Finish group on the Shadow Authority includes 5 Kettering councillors from all parties out of 8. And it's been really well supported by some superb officers who have the passion and skills needed to progress towards carbon neutral when the baton passes to Northants Council. So this report is a great step in what I hope is a story in which we will finally get to grips and recognise that this is a climate emergency, not little local difficulty. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis, please.
I believe Councillor Adams was before me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh yeah, you've moved to the top of the pile, Councillor Davis. My apologies, Councillor Adams.
I apology, Councillor Adams. I only do as I'm told, apparently. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to worry, I would have gone after Councillor Davis. It wouldn't have been a problem. Obviously, this is a great piece of work, but I have to say there are some disappointing things that just come from listening to the conversations and the speakers that have very kindly come along tonight. Just talking about the litter picking, you know, it's great that people go out there and do litter picking, and it's great that we've got things like the wombles, etc., etc. But what it proves to me, really, that nobody's spoken about is it's us. It's the people that make the litter. There is nobody going out there and dropping the litter apart from all of us as individuals of the borough. So to me, it sort of really raises the question, where are we at with education and educating and talking about these things in lots of different places? Because, as you know, we can get a certain amount of people on board. We can get volunteers to do things, but unless we get the whole of the population involved in this and understanding what it is we're doing to our borough and our world and our planet, then, you know, I feel we're always going to be on the back foot. We're never going to get there. And, you know, moving on to the bees, I've got to speak about the bees because I was with Councillor Hakewell many years ago when we had a little task and finish group about the bees. And, you know, things like, I know that planning permissions can't be refused on things like a Boston ivy on the front of the library. But the councillors on that night that sat on that planning committee went into an almost stunned silence when I read out some very basic information about how much Boston ivy feeds the bees in the autumn. 85% of the pollen in a hive in autumn has come from a Boston ivy. So, you know, I understand that we can't refuse the planning permission, but if we had in those planning details, yes, the Boston ivy needs to be removed. It's not as destructive as ordinary ivies because it is deciduous, so the buildings do get a rest through the winter months to recuperate. But if we'd have just had, but we're going to plant some here, this is where the next Boston ivy is going to be, and that's where it can be allowed to grow, bloom and take over because it is a fast grower. But we don't get that detail. We don't get that information. So like some of the speakers said already, it would be nice to see what we are replacing like for like. It's not just trees either. You know, the hedgerows, part of a lot of planning permissions automatically destroy miles of hedgerows. But do we ever talk about putting those hedgerows anywhere else? You know, do we ever say? And then when we're destroying them, how long has it taken those hedgerows to be there in that mature state that they're in? So I just feel there is lots and lots to do. New buildings themselves, new houses that we're building all over the borough. Planning legislation is so far behind with where we need to be. And it's a constant discussion on planning meetings about why are we letting these builders build these properties when we know they're nowhere near up to scratch for where we want to be. So to push that legislation and get that legislation and start fighting in the bigger picture, you know, let's fight around Kettering, but let's get out there and fight nationally. Let's fight our governments to put into place what we need to make our borough a pleasant and green place to live in. So I feel education is missing out this paper. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Actually, Councillor O'Hara next.
Councillor O'Hara, please.
Thank you, Chair. I thought Councillor Ash Davis was before me, but I don't mind if Ash doesn't. Just a few points. Let's kind of just raise the issue on planning, and obviously we've just or a couple of back we discussed the white paper that the government forward about things that might change in planning. But more importantly, on planning policy, which is very much joined up thinking between our four councils that one Northamptonshire. We have been trying to look at how we can make buildings more eco-friendly, and we do look at things like ground source heat pumps. We are trying to change the way people think, but that's not going to happen until the costs come down, and the costs won't come down until they're implemented, and the way to do that is through building regulations. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's what some of the work that's being done on planning policy is aiming to do. So I think that we are very, very aware, and we do raise it frequently at planning when applications come through to us to look at it. And we are very aware of people's concerns to maintain our environment in an eco-friendly way and make sure that it isn't ruled by the car, and that there are pathways that are wide enough for people to walk and cycle, which is what we wanted in the development at Hanwood Park, which is why we're having the cycleways, so that it is very much connected in an eco-friendly way, and to try and reduce emissions. But I think the start of it has to be through planning policy and changing building regulations, and I believe that we are making inroads into that through our planning department. So, you know, I think credit should be given to them for the work that they are doing in the background that hasn't quite come to fruition yet, but I hope will come to fruition quite quickly, especially because the government wants us to dispose of gas central heating within the next 5 years. So I hope to see those improvements that we're already at the forefront of because of the work that we've done on planning policy and the papers we've submitted to the government, which the government is now reviewing. So I hope that the speakers tonight are aware of that and can take that on board for the work that we've undertaken already. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Davis, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Davis this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to wholeheartedly support this action plan. It's been great to see the huge progress we've made over the last year with all these improvements. Very often when we get a big wad of paper, it's often easy just to think it's words on paper. It's not, it's genuine examples with more to come. We've had wildflowers at Weekly, pardon the weeds, we're feeding the bees. Trees seem to be popping up everywhere I look around the borough, certainly in the last few months. And we also have things like the cycle hub on the way, of course, thanks to government funding. I'd really hope that we can also build on the legacy of things like Beat the Street to uplift everyone's mental and physical well-being, certainly as we escape COVID and move out of that. And I really wish that every single council had a comprehensive document like this. Is it perfect? No, but I think there's a great amount of stuff we've done, more stuff on the way. I also sit on the Climate Task and Finish group at Unitary at the shadow level, and very much look forward to that report coming forward very shortly, so we can continue to build on this agenda, get it embedded, and agree this forward. And really praise all of the officers and grounds team, award-winning grounds team, who make all this happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
The leader, Councillor Roberts.
Councillor Roberts.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Mayor. I've listened with care on the debate and the discussion that's taken place this evening. And yes, there have been some criticisms, but there's also been some generous words said about the progress that we've made. We are totally committed to helping the environment. We've got one Earth, and we've all got an investment. We've all got to invest in that one Earth. The Kettering East Sustainable Urban Extension under John Prescott, you know, we didn't walk away from it all those years ago, and I'm not making a political point. They wanted houses built. We didn't walk away from it. We made it better, and we got open space, more open space than we apparently should have had according to the rules. And we're maintaining that open space, and we're maintaining areas where nature can breathe and blossom. I don't know whether it's a Boston ivy, but I did plant an ivy in my garden, and it does tend to grow prolifically. So I'm doing my little bit for the bees. I didn't know that, Linda, I really didn't. So that was useful. But let's get behind it. Let's look at the positives. We can work on the positives, but we can also build back on some of the weaker areas, and let's take this forward into the new unitary. On the front of all of the reports that come forward from the new unitary, shadow unitary, we do talk now about the effect on the environment. So we are getting our DNA embedded into the future of that organisation. Come and get involved. Come and help. It's easy to criticise, but it's ever so difficult to actually achieve these things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to pick up something that Councillor Adams spoke about on planning, because she knows that we are really, really hot on flats, rabbit hutches for our people to live in. And if we're not careful, we will be a town of 1-bedroom flats where there's no amenity space, no place for anybody to go out and walk or sit or bring children up or even to hang washing out. And it really is good. And Linda's nodding, I can see, because between us, we really hold our planners to account for what we are building and what we are producing in our town. We want places for people to live, not just exist, Mr. Mayor, and long may we continue to do that. Thank you, Councillor Adams. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
No more hands, Mr. Mayor.
So are you all happy with that, councillors? Anybody else want to say anything?
Councillor Talbot does.
Councillor Deering. All right. Councillor Deering, do you want the right to reply or speak?
Well, if I might, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for inviting me on again. I want to thank everybody for what they've said. I think there's been some very interesting points made, both good and bad, of course. But I think that it's nice to know that people are A, keeping to account on this, and B, looking at how we're working with it. And I think some of the messages I got from tonight as well, which is important, is that, you know, we need to communicate the good better than we are doing, which is really interesting. And I think that that should be communicated in the reports as we move forward into unitary. So I would like to thank everybody. I'd also like to say that I think, well, despite the fact that I drive a car, I have done my best this year because I have replanted a whole border with wildflowers for the bees. But I also have to say that the birds do seem to be enjoying the seeds at the moment. But I will keep trying.
You keep trying, Councillor. Thank you very much.
Councillor Talbot, I think, was trying to make herself heard.
Councillor Talbot.
Just need to unmute, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, there has been mention, of course, about collection of litter by volunteers. Obviously, KBC do give out gloves and bags for the litter, but there are hazards in collecting certain items of litter. That will be syringes and used needles by those using drugs. Dog mess bags, obviously the list could go on, broken bottles. I'd just like to know if KBC are advising the volunteers that if they injure themselves, then unfortunately the council are not responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are we there?
Councillor Tebbett.
Oh, Councillor Tebbett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've deliberately waited until the end. I would just like to advise all of those present of what is happening at the Joint Planning Committee meeting on the 2nd of March. And I can do little better than to read out the recommendation that will be going to that committee. The head of the North Northants Joint Planning and Development Unit recommends that the Joint Planning Committee endorses and recommends to NNC, that's the new Northants Council, the approach to local design guidance set out in this report. In particular, the immediate use of Building for a Healthy Life, a key tool for shaping and assessing development proposals in line with the policies of the JCS, and the early adoption by NNC of a design charter setting out the Council's ambition for place shaping and the processes through which this will be delivered. With that, I will close my bit of preaching. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tebbett. Thank you for that piece of information. That gives us more information than we had before you spoke. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Are we there?
I see Councillor Hakel's hand up, but he can't speak again on this item.
I'm sorry, Councillor Hakewell, you've already spoken once. I can't accept you.
It's a point of personal clarification.
Yes.
And my personal clarification is, I asked, where is the pollinator strategy in this document? And I haven't heard a reply.
Well, we are going to go back to Councillor Jelly, who will be giving, hopefully with the help of an officer, the reply that you require.
Thank you.
Councillor Jelly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. What I'll do for Councillor Hakewell is I will get that information with the officers and I'll come back to him in the next couple of days.
It's in the document, not.
Thank you for that, Councillor. There are one or two other questions outstanding. Are you going to do the same? There's.
What we'll do, Mr. Mayor, obviously all of this has been recorded, so I think all of the information, the questions and everything, we can go through and we can respond. I'll make sure that we respond to the people. And I think all of this information needs to feed into the task and finish group in Northampton Council going forward. And then they can take all of this forward. You know, it's going to be their gig going forward. And I think that's really important, that all of this information and the passion from these people who've spoken this evening, which I thank very much for coming along, make sure that that gets to these people on the working party and we drive it forward to the new council.
Can I also ask you keep me informed? I'd like to see the answers that will be sent out to the people who have asked the questions, please.
I will indeed, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Right. So if we go to the recommendation, please. Have we got one? Is there a recommendation? Are we just noting this report?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 8, which is regulation of investigatory powers. That's the RIPA annual report. Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad you said the phrase. I've got it in capitals here, but I'll just call the RIPA report, if you don't mind. A little bit of housekeeping out of necessity as well. You can put your teeth back in now, James.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, as can be seen in the report in section 2, this council has made no authorisations of covert surveillance. However, it is incumbent on us to maintain a RIPA policy and make a nil return. The current policy was approved by Council in 2019 and it was recommended at that time that Council reports RIPA activity annually to full Council, and as such this is before us tonight. And Mr. Mayor, as you would expect, the Council does and will comply with established legislation. I'll wait for somebody to second for me and then I'll come back to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Howes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support and second this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to debate.
Yeah, Councillor Hakewell.
Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I pick up some of what you were saying about the Wombles. Out in the rural areas, and sadly, Mr. Mayor, in the same way as the pollinator strategy hasn't moved forward, I asked a series of questions 12 months ago for which I was going to get answers about fly tipping. And you may wonder, Mr. Mayor, why fly tipping and RIPA come together. I never got those answers. It's 12 months on. And I think it's really sad that those who are in a position to give answers don't have them on the night. They should do. They should grasp their brief. My point here is, Mr. Mayor, that this strategy, and I know the MP is listening, maybe we can get some action. When villages, when rural residents know there is a hotspot for fly tipping, one of the options is to put cameras up. And I'm sure Mr. Mayor and other councillors have seen that on various TV programmes. This RIPA policy means it's almost impossible to get the permission to put a camera up in a tree or in a place where we know fly tipping is taking place. I think it's really sad, and I would hope, or at least move, that we have some contact with government to say that it should be possible for the law-abiding people of our rural areas to have surveillance and have enforcement and have prosecution of fly tippers. I think that has increased massively over the last year and over the last 2 years. And it's simply not acceptable that people can fly tip, not only in our lay-bys and gateways, but also on occasions, Mr. Mayor, along roads where they just tip out building material and so on. So I hope that the executive and anyone who does get onto the next authority takes this up seriously. We want a simple way of catching these people committing this environmental crime. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you for letting me talk on that. And I know, as you nod, you feel just the same way as I do about the ruination of our countryside by fly tippers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hakewell. Anybody else?
Councillor Adams.
Councillor Adams, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a point of clarification, really. On the appendix on page 38, under 1.11, do those two first bullet points mean the same thing, or is there a misprint and should one of them say something different?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, page 38 of the appendix, under point 1.11, the first two bullet points.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask Martin Hammond to perhaps clarify that, because we are talking about legal documents and I don't want to give the wrong.
Councillor Thurland, Mr. Hammond is now looking at the said document.
Thank you.
Could Councillor Adams can give Mr. Hammond a little bit of time to look at that, and he'll come back to you shortly and give you your answer.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we'll just wait while Mr. Hammond looks at the documents and he'll come back to you, Councillor. I'm sorry to say I can't answer that question because my bedtime reading didn't get that far, Councillor Adams.
Oh, not mine, Mr. Chairman. No, I think there is a subtle difference in the intention. I do appreciate that it's probably not obvious, but there is a small technical difference in what they mean. It perhaps could have been written slightly more clearly, but that will be for the unitary to determine its own policy in due course.
All right, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Any other?
No, Mr. Mayor, nothing.
We'll go back to Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think with any of these things that come with the legalities and legal things that we have to do and how we do them, we are following rules and regulations that are probably written by better people than us. And while I do agree that fly tipping is a scourge, we need to be able to find out who does it. That doesn't mean that we can put a camera up every tree that we want to where people are living. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go to the recommendation 8.1 that the council notes this report, and we are doing what we are expected to do legally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We don't vote on that, do we?
I just remember dissent.
Show of hands.
Show of hands. Sorry. Show of hands for.
Yeah, I'm just checking the second page. Mr. Mayor. Yeah.
Anybody against?
All the hands have dropped, Mr. Mayor.
Any abstentions?
Let me just check the second page. Right, we're good.
All happy. Thank you very much. That passes. Right, item 9, no motions. And item 10, I have to say for the first time, we have no questions. And item 11, matters of urgency, they are none known. So can I say thank you all for joining us this evening for our penultimate, and I'm amazed I can actually say that word, full council meeting. I do believe we have a date for our last council meeting, which is the 24th of March, 24th of March at the normal time of 6 o'clock. It's a virtual meeting again. I am so sorry, fellow councillors, that we cannot all get together for the last meeting. I can actually say that word. What I hope to do is to take this borough council out with the best way I can. There's lots of things planned, so I hope you're all going to have a full contingent of councillors, because there's lots going to go on. and I'm really looking forward to it, but yet I'm not looking forward to it. You can understand what I'm saying. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I now declare this virtual meeting closed.